Right, so if you were one of those people who were determined that Keir Starmer was going to turn left once he got into power, his conduct last night in Parliament should have torn that belief to absolute shreds. As those of us warning of his right-wing leanings, his authoritarianism, that what you were seeing was what you were going to get, his actions to purge the left of his own party were proven beyond doubt. He's in power now. He got the power. He's been in power for less than 2 weeks, and he's already managed to find an excuse to purge 7 of what's left of the left of his own party, whilst others meekly voted as instructed. If Keir Starmer wanted any hope of shaking that Sir Keir Starmer moniker of his, he's cemented it now for life, as firmly as Thatcher the milk snatcher. But being able to assault his own left wing again is all he'll be thinking of today. He won't be thinking of kids in poverty. He's found money for so many other things. It is his political choice, his political will, to keep kids hungry. Keir Starmer is already the Prime Minister who punished his own MPs for opposing poverty. Now you tell me he isn't a bloody Tory, because he damn well is. He's put party before country, before the needs of the nation, and will only get worse as they keep getting their no money left excuses lined up. Right, so Keir Starmer has now nailed on his moniker of Sir Keir Starmer, and every single person out there in the run-up to the election demanding we side with Starmer to get the Tories out, and saying he's bound to be better, that he's going to shift left, you'll see will be proven right. They ought to have been sobbing into their cornflakes this morning, or at the very least having a long, hard look at themselves in the mirror, and finally admit to themselves that they were fooled. Starmer is now in power. He has a massive majority. He can quite happily show his true colours all day long. And he's absolutely done that by instigating a 3-line whip to vote against an SNP amendment to the King's Speech, Labour's legislative programme for the next year, that would lift 300,000 kids out of poverty by scrapping the 2-child benefit cap. Though you'll see various figures for this number of children depending on the degree of poverty you're talking about, be it severe poverty or absolute poverty, different measurements thereof. But fundamentally, all of these groups where children make up part of a household that is in poverty would be helped through the lifting of this cap. Labour knows it is an unpopular and cruel policy. Starmer himself knows this because in 2020, all that time ago, he tweeted out, "We must scrap the inhuman work capability assessments and private provision of disability assessments, e.g. ATOS, scrap punitive sanctions, 2-child limit and benefits cap." So he knows. Therefore he's got no excuse. Therefore he's the sort of person to make a conscious choice to keep a cruel policy in place that will keep kids going hungry. I wouldn't even put it past him to have done this on purpose, purely to give himself the excuse to purge more left MPs, as he has just done, who would never have voted to sanction or reinforce such a thing. Kids being used as political football to carry on his personal attacks, his grudge, his purge of the left of the Labour Party, the heart and soul of the party, the moral compass of the Labour Party. And what would be left after that? Would just be yet another pro-establishment Tory party to bend its knee to the whims of the rich and powerful. Keir Starmer was not acting like a Conservative, folks. He literally is one, and a particularly venal and nasty one. Think about it this way, though. For as much as we could, for example, attack Tony Blair and his governments for the awful choices and decisions they made, his government chose to lift millions of kids out of poverty with policies from Sure Start to tax credits. Plenty of people, and I'm guilty of this as well, have readily compared Starmer to Blair as an indicator of how right-wing Starmer actually is. It can be argued that such policies as this from Blair were just breadcrumbs sort of policies to appease his left wing. He never purged them. He accepted them. He even had 1 or 2 in his cabinet from time to time. Starmer, in reality, is so much worse than Blair ever was. He won't accept the left. He's purged them incessantly at membership level since becoming Labour leader, so the signs have been there for years. And now he's Prime Minister. Now he's in government. Now he's in power. And he is making governing decisions so he can do the same to any MP who steps out of his dictatorial lines. What kind of monster imposes a 3-line whip which carries with it the risk of punishment should an MP not follow that whip over child poverty? Over a determination to not fix it. All whilst, as another instance, the royal family get a pay rise of 53%. It's perverse. And this was literally the first votes on the new Labour government's legislative programmes that he does this, under 2 weeks, and he already suspends 7 of his own MPs for defying him. And the most angering and maddening part of it is it would only take a very minor tax change on the rich to find the money to pay for this. A 1% wealth tax on assets over £10 million would pay for this 3 times over. But God forbid Starmer taxed the rich at all. That lost money presumably might end up as Labour donations if he plays his cards right. Why feed kids with it? There's another argument others might make that Blair inherited a growing economy and Starmer, he'd inherited a Tory mess. But even that doesn't stack up when you compare what was possible and what was done by this same Labour Party in the post-war era, with mass house building, the creation of social security, the NHS. It wasn't a case of, we can't afford that, we've got no money to do it. This lot won't even work to reduce hunger amongst children. It's worlds apart and exposes all political excuses as political choice. The SNP in Scotland have been offsetting this policy for years, showing it is absolutely possible. It's also notable, while I bring the SNP up, that not one single Scottish Labour MP voted for this amendment either. So take note, Scotland. But it just requires leadership and a determination to get this done, and it would be done, and Starmer has none. Because he does not care. Starmer is deliberately choosing to starve kids by keeping this policy. If he wanted to find the money, he'd just print the damn money. We expect this sort of evil from the Tories. We do not expect it from Labour, who keep coming in saying, we've got to fix the Tory mess. Well, you're not fixing this, are you? You're keeping it. But the warning signs were there, and people were warned. Starmer now has 411 MPs. 42 of them didn't bother to vote at all. They abstained. Shame on them. Just 7 of them had the courage of their convictions to not vote to keep kids in poverty, regardless of the consequences for themselves personally. John McDonnell, Afsana Begum, Richard Bergen, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Imran Hussain, Zara Sultana, and the long-standing Right to Food campaigner, Ian Byrne, who Labour tried desperately to get deselected as an MP, like they successfully did with several others, but in his instance they failed. And actually, if anything, given his particular work on food poverty, this is probably actually a solid reason that his constituents, particularly, may well have actually re-elected him. All stood up for child poverty, all stood against kids going hungry, and they've been stripped to the Labour whip for it, punished for it, meaning they must now sit as independent MPs, to be reviewed in 6 months, apparently, as punishment for their transgressions. In other words, I would imagine how they choose to vote over the next 6 months will also be taken into account as to whether they get the whip back at the end of that time, or whether they will remain suspended for however long, possibly indefinitely. And after Jeremy Corbyn got suspended, we know damn well Starmer is perfectly happy to keep MPs suspended for years, if not indefinitely. He didn't even need to do this either. It was so unnecessary to have this 3-line whip with the size of his majority. He was going to win this vote anyway. He stuffed his ranks with enough loyal yes-men as candidates anyway, all up and down the country, to ensure such things. But like I said before, I believe this was just as much seen as an opportunity to drive out even the tiny remnant of a left wing he still has on his benches. The 7 Labour MPs were joined in backing the SNP amendment by the 6 independent MPs, 9 MPs from Northern Irish parties, the Lib Dems, the SNP, Plaid Cymru, and all 4 of the Green Party MPs. The suspended MPs have come out showing defiance and are utterly unapologetic for their actions. Nor should they be. They should be proud of doing the right thing, and we should all be appreciative of them for doing what they did. Here's a couple of examples. Zara Sultana, for instance, tweeted out that I have been informed by the Chief Whip and the Labour Party leadership that the whip has been withdrawn from me for voting to scrap the 2-child benefit cap, which would lift 330,000 children out of poverty. I will always stand up for the most vulnerable in our society. And Afsana Begum, another MP Starmer has callously targeted for deselection, wrote, I voted against the 2-child benefit cap, which has contributed to rising and deepening levels of child poverty and food insecurity for many East End families. I have now been informed I have had the whip withdrawn. The other MPs have all posted similar messages. There's another point worth making here, though, and that is Labour's get-out-of-jail-free card in all of this. Their apparent child poverty task force being set up by Liz Kendall, now the MP in charge, or the minister in charge of the DWP. When asked about this in a recent interview, Kendall could neither offer up any terms of reference for this task force, nor the time frame it would be reporting back in. which of course would be time kids remain in poverty anyway. It's a nice soundbite to excuse not lifting the cap, but if a journalist chooses to dig into it, there's absolutely nothing there. It's just a gimmick to dodge answering for choosing to keep kids in poverty, nothing more. We will see plenty more Tory policy in effect being enacted over the next few weeks, being kept, especially with the collective spinelessness being shown in the face of kid starvers' ruthlessness. Raids on migrants, deportations back to Bangladesh and more, stripping back trans healthcare, not taxing the rich. Starmer's word getting broken on more and more issues as we're certain to see. The government loyalty to Israel continuing, all the warning signs were there. And now, well, instead of getting a Labour government, we're going to get a rerun of David Cameron and George Osborne instead. John McDonnell possibly made the most on-point comment ahead of this vote by turning Keir Starmer's own words on him, saying by voting for the SNP amendment, by voting to end this cruel Tory benefit cap, he was putting country before party. That is literally what these 7 Labour MPs did. That just 7 out of 411 Labour MPs did so, though, is an absolute travesty. Shows this new government represents no change at all, and we're in for another 5 years of misery, as if the Tories had never left office. Meanwhile, as if keeping kids hungry isn't enough to put you off Starmer, how about him being able to control every single aspect of your life with a policy move that would allow this former human rights lawyer to end up actually overriding your actual human rights? If you already thought he was a madman, as I do, for keeping kids in poverty off the back of this video, and other media sources as well, this video recommendation here ought to nail the point on for certain. So consider watching it next, and I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.